Alarm in the Gulf after ships are attacked off the UAE coast. What does it mean for global oil supplies? And can anyone secure shipping lines in a volatile region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. Sabotaged and significantly damaged. Saudi Arabia says 2 of its oil tankers were attacked off the coast of the UAE. Riyadh also called on the international community to protect maritime navigation. The incidents happened off the coast of Fujairah. The Emirate denied reports of explosions at its port on Sunday, but the Emirati government later said 4 commercial ships flagged under several nationalities had been hit, although there were no injuries or deaths. The attack was condemned by several countries, including Iran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Said Abbas Mousavi has called for an investigation, saying the incidents in the Sea of Oman are alarming and regrettable. Such incidents will have a negative impact on the security of shipping and maritime transport in the region. Regional states should be alert about the conspiracies orchestrated by ill-wishers to undermine the stability and security in the region. Well, Iran has recently threatened to block oil flows through the key shipping route of the Strait of HORMUZ in response to US sanctions. The strait links oil producers in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia and UAE, to markets around the world. It's been at the heart of tensions for decades now. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the 2 sides disrupted each other's oil exports in what was known as the Tanker War. In 2008, the United States said Iranian boats approached and threatened its warships in the strait. In 2010, a Japanese oil tanker was attacked in the strait. An armed group linked to Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility. And in 2015, Iranian ships fired shots at a Singapore-flagged tanker. Iran says it damaged one of its oil platforms. All right, now joining me here in the studio, let's bring in our guests. We've got Mahjoob Zweiri, Director of the Gulf Studies Centre at Qatar University. In London, Manouchehr Takin, an independent oil analyst. And in Beirut, Elias Farhat, retired military general and defence analyst. Welcome to you all. If I could start perhaps with Mahjoob. So no one's claimed responsibility for this attack, but whoever did this is sending a very clear message, right?
Absolutely. This is a message of escalation. If you put things in a context, we have the American administration represented with Trump says that, we need all of this crisis about bringing Iran to the negotiation table. There are some, I would say, parties, they are not interested of the United States goes back to the negotiation with Iran. I think they are interested to see more escalation. And I think the responsibility is basically on the shoulder of those parties. Let's not forget that there is an environment of tension is being created in the last few weeks with the war of words between the United States and Iran. And I think the reaction of Iran also was very tense as well when they said that they will block the HORMUZ for all ships, basically. And I think this kind of...
Is this attack basically part of that sort of demonstration of power, or is it going to be seen as that, as the vulnerability of the shipping supplies?
Of course, it's related to that, and I think more important is actually the events or the incidents which took place in the last 24 hours. So far, there is nothing clear about what happened, when it happened, where are the images about what happened, and all of these raise more question about the timing of the event or the incident, and also who's behind this incident. And it's basically give us one indicator that there are, I would say, countries who are interested to see more escalation rather than bringing things to be more cool down.
All right, and we should perhaps also point out that no one's claimed responsibility, and I don't think anyone's been officially blamed by anyone for this attack. Let's bring in Elias and talk a little bit about From a strategic sort of analysis perspective, the UAE built this pipeline to take oil to Fujairah to kind of bypass the possibility of the Strait of Hormuz being blocked. So one assumes this incident shows that even if one bypasses the Strait of Hormuz, oil supplies can still be very vulnerable in the Sea of the Gulf of Oman around Fujairah, right? Is that basically what all this is about?
Yes, so far the UAE and others, they consider Al-Fujairah is far away from the tension in the Strait of Hormuz. In spite that it's 150 kilometers far and it's not a distance in that area, but they feel that when they bypass the Strait of Hormuz and transport the oil through the pipelines to the port of Fujairah, that means that they can avoid the cut of oil, exporting oil when Hormuz is shut. This incident indicates that whether is the Hormuz is cut or open, that means the Fujairah is vulnerable and in the range of all people. That does not mean that Iran has done this or any other side or any other proxy or any other side in order to ignite the spark for this in this tension, but this exposed the security of the port of Fujairah and all the ports, especially this is very important point in terms of the United Arab Emirates experience in administering and running ports all over the world, and this is a major breach in this security. So there are many strategic outcomes of this sabotage. But let me move to another point, that the authorities in United Arab Emirates did not elaborate on the attacks and on the what so-called sabotages.
Okay, Elias, let me jump in there. We'll come back. That is a good point, but I'll come back to that in a moment. On the point, the first point which you're making about the vulnerability, let me take that point to Manouchehr and say, from an oil market perspective, it almost doesn't matter who is behind this. Is the bottom line that the oil supply there is very vulnerable?
That is true, quite true. I think we have to look at the order of magnitude. Out of, say, 100,000 barrels per day oil produced in the world, about 60,000, 70,000 is actually transported and traded. Out of about 67 million barrels per day oil traded per day, about 17, 18 comes out of the Middle East, out of the Persian Gulf. So this is a very huge percentage, and it is not replaceable by any means, any other producer or strategic reserves and so on. So it definitely is very important to the extent that the Middle East and the Gulf oil production is not replaceable by any other source of supply.
Do you think it's going to increase the sense of vulnerability, which in turn is going to impact oil prices?
Of course, any story, any event of uncertainty, accidents, industrial accidents, acts of sabotage, which bring in uncertainty and fear of a disruption of a continuous flow of oil, definitely would make the price go up. But there is supply-demand, actual physical movement of oil produced and bought by refineries. And then there is the perception, futures market, trading, and so on, which is going on in the financial market. And this latter part, it makes has a major impact on the price of oil. So before any disruption happens and a shortage of supply occurs, the prices go up. So it depends on the perception and the ideas of those who are actually buying and selling in the market. If they think this incident is a temporary, is minor, it would not affect the price. But if they develop a fear that actually this might lead to a major incident and a disruption of oil supply, the prices will definitely go up.
Mahjoob, I guess the last thing the US wants right now is high oil prices, especially from a domestic perspective for the US president.
Absolutely. I mean, Trump does not want the oil price to go up. Neither countries in the region, and I think nor a country like China or Japan. I think.
So how much of a limitation on any saber rattling is the prospect of high oil prices when those in the Pentagon are thinking about what to do next with their military hardware?
It's hard to predict simply because it doesn't look that the war was an option about when it comes to the issue of Iran. It was the whole issue is about a tool of pressuring Iran. So I don't think so that Pentagon is looking at the oil price and to how much will become. I think we know that the oil price is affected by the political process, by the statements, by the war of words. So everyone now trying to calm down and to look at the situation and to avoid that impact of this war of words. I think this also applies on the Pentagon. This applies on Trump himself. Let's remember, a few days ago, when there were a lot of tough words from Tehran, from other countries about the situation in the Gulf, Trump came and said, actually, we don't want war. His Secretary of State says, actually, war is not actually is our target, is changing the regime's behavior. So it's very clear that if at least from the administration perspective, that the war is not an option, even number 2 or number 3. And they already he did indicate that, and his administration, that they wanted to repeat what happened with North Korea. They want to pressure Iran and to bring Iran to the table. Now, there is Sami, let me just finish this point, if you allow me. It's a very tricky point, because both the Americans, they believe that the negotiation is important. The Iranians, they don't want to give advantage to the administration of going to the negotiation. And here, it's a tricky point. Where they can meet without giving a Trump advantage, without also leading to the confrontation, that's really a tricky point between Tehran and Washington.
That is a tricky point. Kind of related to that, of course, we should keep in mind, Elias, that no one has claimed responsibility. Iran, of course, has condemned the attack. However, Iran has said in the past, hey, if we are stopped from exporting our oil, no one else is going to export their oil from the region. A lot of people, or some people, are going to suspect it was someone associated with Iran. Is that going to feed into the tensions between Iran and the US in the region? And how fast, from a sort of military strategic position, can those tensions turn into actual confrontation? Sounds like Mahjoob is not a big believer on that being an option. Are you?
Look, so what was called sabotage, I mean, it uncovered a lot of defects in the system of security in the United Arab Emirates, and it showed that this attack was committed by a well-planned, well-informed, well-equipped people, so that they could have infiltrated to the 4 ships and did what they have done.
Does it have the hallmarks of state backing? From anything, I mean, details are very sketchy, but is there anything to indicate that this is, not just some random individuals carrying this out, but they have state backing?
No. It's not a DI, you do it yourself. I mean, it needs a lot of planning and of information and reconnaissance and a lot of training and how to filtrate, how to plant these explosives and where. So, I mean, it's a very complicated operation. We have to look at it at some of professional people that have done this. It's not an incident an ordinary incident so that we can register it to an individual or a small organization, which this makes things more dangerous and the situation more tensive in the region, and the consequences are more critical on the flow of oil and on the Gulf security and the security of the states on the coast of the Gulf, given that the American masses, which is Abraham Lincoln carrier and 2 amphibious groups, one boxes and the other is Kearsarge, they have on board about 9,000 people, which means that they can land in some place in the Gulf and occupy a head bridge in order to develop some military operations. The American intentions are very serious. How matter they say that their option is not the war with Iran and this is number 2 or number 3 or number 4. I think it's number 1 of this bringing those amphibious groups with Abraham Lincoln, so that this attack on the tankers in Fujairah is equal to the danger of the Americans constitute in the region. But who did that? As my fellow said, that some people may have done it in order to encourage the United States or push the United States to start the war. On the other side, you can say some people made it in order to prove the vulnerability of the whole security system of the United Arab Emirates.
Right. Let me bring in Manouchehr once again and ask the question that what does any disruption of oil supplies from the Strait of Hormuz mean for the world economy? You've already pointed out the huge percentage it represents, but I guess some countries, major world economies like the United States, they have developed or increased their domestic production over the last how many years? What ultimately would it mean for the world economy if you had trouble with oil supplies in that part of the world?
Well, the prices will go up to several $100,000 a barrel. It is now 60, 70, 80. It might be 100, 200, or $300. No one knows. As I said, we are talking about 17
what would that mean
million
for the world
out
economy?
Of
Are we talking
60
about
million.
A reduction
And
in global growth?
with the price going, of course, with the price going up, the input as an energy becoming expensive, many industries would not be any more competitive. Very high oil price definitely has a negative adverse effect on the global economy.
On the other hand, would it encourage some industries like fracking and so on?
No, that is separate. You see, the effort, the industry developing, trying to increase supply is going on smoothly. You see, it's increase in supply of oil in anywhere, in an oil province, such as fracking in the southern United States or in other shale basins and other activities take long time, and they're all the time going. They might increase or decrease the level of investment based on the decision of the top management of the company and their policies and so on. So if the prices go up, it doesn't mean that suddenly the frackers would increase. They will definitely have more money and go about it, but it doesn't come out that quickly. There is a lead time. In traditional oil exploration and development, we are talking about a few years. In the case of shale and fracking, we are talking of a few months. But still, the volume of new oil coming out of, say, United States is really very, very much, very little. We are talking maybe a few 100,000 barrels per day, optimistically speaking, over the next few months. Over the last years or so, every year, these shale additions have been something like 500,000 or 1 million barrel per day addition per year. So optimistically, it can give a bit more. But
right.
So there is no substitute of supply coming for the oil from the Middle East, as I mentioned before. And this high price
Right.
That has negative effect on the global economy. It will cause recession.
Right.
And you see, the oil importing countries, China, India, the Latin America, and the Europe, the price becoming twice, 3 times, and so on. It will definitely have caused unemployment, recession, and a slowdown.
Right.
It is not, as I mentioned, a major a few $100,000 per day up and down, and maybe $60, $70. We are talking about a major $100 to few $100 a barrel.
Okay, let me
So
take a
we
point.
shouldn't talk about this
Elias.
casually. Please, go
Bottom
ahead.
line, Elias, can anybody guarantee the safety of maritime navigation and oil supplies in that region?
I don't think that anyone can guarantee, because all this military deployment in the Gulf and in the sea did not permit this attack on these 4 carriers. So what do they do again? And additional measures in order to make sure that the Gulf is secure. I don't think it is.
Okay, let me flip the question the other way around, though, and ask also, can anyone really block oil supplies coming out of that region, as some, like I said, the Iranians have talked about, doing that in the past. Can anyone block oil supplies 100%? We went through this in the 80s. Well, okay, Mahjoob wants to get in there. Let's bring Mahjoob in.
It's unlikely, not only simply because Iran, if you look at the political behavior of Iran has no intention to block the HORMUZ. However, I think what is important is the psychological impact of the crisis on the oil price, on the insurance companies, all of this, because I think we should be worried about the ramification of the current situation rather than on the blockade or blocking the HORMUZ, because the impact now, the psychological impact on the markets, on the insurance companies, on the other elements of the business of the oil is absolutely huge. I think this will lead to a lot of impact on the world economy rather than the issue of blocking actually the HORMUZ itself.
And perhaps also, Elias, a point to keep in mind, if there's any disruption in shipping, we're talking about a region which relies on shipping for a lot of its supplies beyond just oil, right?
Of course, they are in the Far East and in the Middle East, all the people are dependent on the oil of the Gulf. So they could not live without this oil. And if there is any disrupt in the oil flow the flow of oil from the Gulf, that means, as you said before, there will be a recession, unemployment, maybe crisis, maybe wars, even in order to compensate what was lost of oil. In some countries, you know that we have many countries here that they import 90 or 100% of energy. So how could they live if this flow was stopped? That means that will be a catastrophe in some countries, such as Turkey, for example.
All right, we are running out of time, so I think we're going to end it now. It's been a fascinating discussion. Of course, no one has a crystal ball to see how this is going, but I think everybody realizes there's a lot at stake, not only for the region, but for the world as a whole and what happens next in the Gulf region. Let's thank our guests very much, Mahjoob Zweiri, Manouchehr Takin, and Elias Farhat. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here. For now, it's goodbye.